Good morning or good afternoon to everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize, I'm losing my voice. Just being busy with getting Connect going. I've been on the phone all day, and we're running late today because I started talking with Rick and lost track of time. So today's presentation is tools for digital commerce, e-commerce, PIM, and EDI. And of course, we have Rick Sundell here from Grey Wolf Systems. Rick is a great friend of mine, and it was just so great to connect with him today. Looking forward to seeing him at Connect next week, and all of you hopefully will also be joining us. So as always, I like to start out with a big thank you to our user group officers. And of course, that's Sam, Tim, Mike, Tony, and Ted. Obviously, as we're gearing up for Connect and having just returned from Insights, we really do, yeah, we got it in less than 2 weeks, Connect is, that's true. Sorry, someone's just making a comment here. But as we get ready for Connect, and of course, we were just at Insights a few weeks ago. This board of directors do so much work behind the scenes. I really can't speak enough to the work that they do and the time that they dedicate to the user group. So if you have a moment, it would mean a lot to me if you send them a quick note of thanks. They can always be reached at officers@P21WWUG. And of course, they will all be at the Connect conference starting August the 15th. Holy moly, that snuck up on all of us, but you will see them there at our WUG update session on Sunday afternoon. And you can always pick out our user group officers because they're wearing our very beautiful user group logo shirts. And of course, registration is still open for Connect 2021 at the Hyatt Regency at Peachtree. You can find all the information you're looking for by going to the web address on the screen. Also, if you're on the user group website at the top right-hand corner, you'll see the Connect 2021 logo. Clicking on that takes you over to our little microsite, which has all the information regarding how to register and the options that are available for you to register, the session schedule and session descriptions, also information about our sponsors, and of course we've recently updated it with COVID protocols as they become available. So please be sure to check out that information there, and as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to me directly. And here again is the summary of the different options we have available. Now, whether you choose option 1 or option 2, you will still get access to the recordings and the virtual sessions. This is a new system for us. We probably will not do this next year where we're doing the virtual program after the fact. So this is unique to this year. In order to access the recordings and in order to attend the virtual sessions, you will need to have access to the user group forum. In the next couple of weeks, you'll see that there will be a new login link at the top of the forum, and that will take you over to the Connect website. That Connect website will have the recordings from the sessions that were done in person, as well as the registration links for the webinar bonus week sessions that we're having. We're actually adding a few sessions to that. You'll see that coming through in the next week or so. And also that's where the recordings of those sessions will be. That Connect website will only be available for about 6 months, and then we'll be taking it down and retiring it while we get ready for Connect 2022. Of course, we know that there's going to be questions, and that's what I'm here for. My contact information is right there on the screen. All of our webinars have moved. Last year, of course, we did our virtual Connect, and with that, we ended up with way more sessions than we've ever had. So they got moved into a new area called online learning, and online learning is divided up by track, including upcoming sessions and different subject areas. I highly recommend that you take a moment and subscribe to the online learning area, particularly upcoming sessions, and you can do so by clicking on that blue bar and choosing subscribe by email. I also recommend, of course, when you're on the user group forum that you subscribe to the various forums that are applicable to you. That way you get email notification as soon as a new topic is posted in those sub forums. Each one of those sub forums has that same option where you can subscribe by email. Now, I know Rick, and I know that he is going to definitely touch on any gotchas that are going to come up during the presentation, but I do like to mention a few disclaimers as we get started. First of all webinars are presented in a volunteer capacity, and we ask that you please take the information in the spirit in which it's being offered. We recommend that you always use your Play database and test anything you learn during these webinars before going live. Always talk to the necessary IT professionals within your organization, the presenter of the session, or others within the user group if you have any questions. This disclaimer also translates into forum posts as well. If you're reading anything on the user group forum that you want to implement in your system, please make sure that you're using your Play database and talking to the necessary IT professionals within your company. We don't want anyone doing anything they shouldn't. I always recommend with a forum post, reach out to the original poster of the forum, or sorry, of the topic, and they can provide you with any additional insight as well. Lastly, of course, here's my contact information. I do apologize if you're trying to reach me by phone right now. It's a little bit difficult and will be definitely until after Connect is over. But do send me an email. If you'd like to jump on the phone to chat, just send me an email and I will reach out to you as soon as I can. I do apologize. Like I said, I do get really busy as we get this close. Now I'm going to pass screen control over to Rick. And while I do, I just want to remind everyone about how to ask questions today. First of all, we highly encourage you to put your questions in as you think about them. And then we know if we need extra time at the end of the presentation to answer those questions as they come up. We prefer that you use the question feature here in GoToWebinar, and that way we can collect them all in one spot and address them as we go. But without further ado, I'm going to put myself on mute here and relax my voice and pass this along to Rick. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Before you go totally on mute, are you seeing my screen with the appropriate power? I'm make sure I'm sharing the right screen.
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time today. I know that a lot is going on. We're seeing a lot of Zoom calls and virtual stuff, and so I'm going to try to make this as non-virtual as I possibly can and make it more of a discussion. I also want to throw out there that if Cheryl sees a question and she thinks it's important to interrupt me, which I have no problem with, we'll take some interruptions. I might also stop every so often to answer questions. So please put the questions out there and I will be glad to answer them as we go. I'll also be putting my contact information up at the end if you want to reach me directly, that we can do as well. The topic today is tools for digital commerce, and I'm going to focus specifically on EDI, e-commerce, and PIM. But we're going to drill into what those are as we're going through this. But what I want to do first is let's talk about what the agenda is going to look like. And I want to try to make this more of a general paradigm discussion as opposed to a sales pitch. I'm not going to try to sell you on something. I am going to try to make you think a little bit about a little bit of the paradigm change. So what I want to go through is, first of all, introduce who Grey Wolf Systems is and who I am, just so that you get a feel for our background and where we're coming from. But then what I want to do is go down this path of what is digital commerce, because we see that buzzword quite a bit, and I want to discuss it and kind of define it a little bit. And then I want to take pieces of that and do a technological drill down of those kinds of pieces that go into digital commerce. Questions, I will open it up at the end, but I will also be available if there's something. I'll stop every so often and say, hey, Cheryl, is there a question or not? And we'll try to address them as we go through it. But the point is, I want this to be somewhat of a give and take, even though you guys don't have an open mic, so that you're talking about stuff as opposed to me just presenting to you and just going pontificating on things. Grey Wolf Systems, we've been in business since 1992, so the math on that makes us almost 30 years that we've been in business. We have been through a lot of different changes. We've gone from networking to EDI to e-commerce to we actually did some Dynachange modifications. We've consulted. We were actually at one time a professional services partner with Epicor at one time up about until 2 years ago. So we've been involved in the P21 arena for approximately, I think I went to my first conference and met Cheryl back in 2014, 2015 timeframe. So we've been doing this for a little while now. And we actually got our teeth cut on another ERP from a competitor to Epicor. So we've been doing this for a very long time for the distribution space, and quite honestly, that's our focus, is the distribution space. My background is I actually was raised in a wholesale distribution. My dad was an auto parts distributor. So I've actually done my fair share of Cardex back in the day of actually keeping inventory on a Cardex system and unloading 40-foot trucks with batteries and fan belts and hoses and all those kinds of things. Got into the technology world, been in this industry for approximately 30 years now. I'm a certified management accountant. I've got into certified strategic consulting, as well as a certified computer professional. So my background is really kind of from a technological finance engineering background perspective, but trying to make it so that it fits in with what you guys are talking about. And I would imagine the audience, I put in the original piece, the audience could be anywhere from technical people to business people to marketing people to accounting. And I'm hoping to try to address all of those kinds of people in the audience today. Let's talk a little bit about what is digital commerce. And one definition, I did some research of who's defining what is digital commerce. And Bloomreach put this out there, which I kind of liked in a way. It talked about what is digital commerce, and you can read this as well as I can, but if you bounce around, you'll see that they've got online and offline channels and product information and customer information and order management and analytics. And then they break some of those things down in some other nice little buzzwords that you may have heard, things like PIM and DAM and ERP. I'm not going to get into the three-letter acronyms too much, but what I wanted to talk about on this was the fact that this is one definition of what is digital commerce. And they didn't really put a bunch of words around it. They just talked about it as kind of in pods, as what are the pieces and parts that make up digital commerce. And I'm not gonna go with the idea of saying that this is the answer, because if you look at this, you've got Internet of Things and you've got marketing automation and different pieces and parts, but I'm gonna steal from some of this when we come up with a definition that I'd like to propose as something that we can talk about. Another one came from SAP, obviously a competitor to Epicor, and this was an article that was put out called The Future of Customer Engagement and Experience, and you can read this again as well as I can, but the summary of it is really kind of that first sentence. It provides the ability for consumers to buy services and products online without having to speak or contact anyone. It's not just the idea of being able to buy services and products online from our perspective, but that's their definition because that's kind of what they're looking at. And if you look at the bullet points below, not only is it just the ability to buy services and products, but they get into things like marketing and promotions and social media and customer service and the customer experience. Sometimes you'll hear that as UX, which is customer UX, which is user experience. When you get into these different pieces, they're throwing these into the definition of digital commerce. And then if you go to Gartner, which is probably the granddaddy of all the definitions, unless you look at Wikipedia, which is everybody putting their piece of definition in. But let's look at Gartner, and this is really probably kind of the cornerstone of what I want to talk about today. Is it says it enables customers to purchase goods and services through an interactive and self-service experience. It includes the analytics, the promotion, the pricing, the customer acquisition, the retention, but I think that they're still a little too narrowly focused on what we're talking about here. Because quite honestly, if you look at it purely from a definitional perspective and looking at it from a word perspective, commerce is the idea of buying and selling stuff. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Commerce is that whole concept. And if you've been in through Business 101 or Econ 101, that's what commerce is defined as. So digital commerce is the digitation of those kinds of things of buying and selling. So how do we define this, and what are the technologies that wrap around it? So I'm going to, obviously I'm a propeller head, so I'm going to spin it into the technological aspects of it from the business side. Let's talk about the business and say, okay, what are the pieces and parts that come into it from a technological perspective? Well, the cornerstone of all of our businesses are the customers. That's why they always say distributors are sales driven. That's because everything's driven by the customer. Without the customer, nothing else happens. So we base that as the bottom. That's why I put this in the bottom of this, is they're the foundation of digital commerce. The customers, from a technological perspective, is how do you deal with them? How do you interface with them? How do you, I love the term when they say customer relationship management, like you actually control the relationship. and that you actually can manage the relationship. It's kind of an oxymoron. There's no such thing, but the terminology has come out where you hear CRM, or customer relationship management. And what is CRM? CRM is getting into the idea of keeping track of information. It used to be called a contact manager back in the 90s. I'm starting to date myself with some of this stuff. But basically, a contact management, a customer relationship management gets into things like sales and support and those kinds of things. But it's really kind of getting all of the information about the customer brought into one central repository. I don't want to use the word database because it could be in a database, but it also could be the processes associated with it. And if you get right down to it, email is how you communicate with a lot of your customers from a technological perspective. Anymore now, everybody complains about email, but it is the cornerstone of the technology with dealing with customers. So adding to this pie of digital commerce are the other two pieces and parts. And this is, again, nothing new to you from a technological or from a business perspective, and that's the products and vendors come into play. But from a technological perspective, what I want to talk about, and if you saw in the first heading, is we're going to talk a little bit about EDI, and we're going to talk about something that you may or may not have heard of or know about. It's called PIM, or Product Information Management. And we're going to show some of that to you as well. But that's really where we're taking now the information about products, and we're bringing in the vendors, our suppliers, of how we get the information or get the product itself, and how do we communicate with those vendors, maybe through EDI. And those are the pieces and parts that we're going to start working with, that we can now start talking about things like marketing. And again, nothing new. Marketing's been around for a long time. How do you get the word out? It comes back to, again, that CRM tool, email, but what's kind of popped up in the latest few years is social media. And do you have a social media plan? And do you have that technology to get into things like LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those kinds of things, and using that as part of your marketing campaign? The next piece, which is really important from a P21 perspective, is now let's talk about the transactions. I mean, you started out in this arena with P21 at a minimum, and you're dealing with sales orders and purchase orders and invoicing and payment processing, and the transaction of how you actually get to being a profitable organization is managing that. And the term ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, used to be called accounting systems, used to be called inventory management. They put a nice little buzzword around it, but in reality, it's all about the transaction there. Used to be a term back in the late 80s and 90s called OLTP, online transaction processing. That's where you started getting into that, as opposed to OLAP, which is online analytical processing. Those were the way we started out in technology back in the 90s. And again, I'm still dating myself. But the key to a wholesale distributor is fulfillment. How do we get the product to them? And from a technological perspective, these are the kinds of buzzwords we're talking about, is maybe the receipt of goods, proof of delivery, advanced ship notice, or an ASN. Are we telling our customers, giving them an advanced ship notice of when it's going to be delivered? That's EDI terminology, but it might also be some email concepts. You get into warehouse management systems of not only is it directed putaways or directed picking, but maybe you've got some management of being able to make sure that you're putting your faster moving products, better fulfillment by putting them closer to the shipping docks, so that you're actually being able to be more efficient with your warehouse process. Or parcel management, where you're getting into freight costs and managing how much the weight is and how much the cubic inches of the size of it that they're getting into now. Or some of you maybe get into 3PL, the third-party logistics, and using those kinds of things. When we start talking today about marketplaces, that kind of comes into play, because this concept of fulfillment by Amazon is something that you got to start thinking about, because realistically, Amazon becomes a third-party logistics for you in that aspect. And then this is the one that kind of comes into play of bringing this digital commerce all into truly digital commerce, is what's the user interface? Are we talking about from a customer perspective? Are we talking about from a vendor perspective, from your perspective? The idea of having that user interface for you is P21. For the vendor, it may be their ERP system. For customer, it may be their ERP system, maybe QuickBooks for all that is, or maybe it's a shopping cart. So if we look at this as being the definition of digital commerce, is the idea of digitizing all of these pieces and parts and these buckets, then if we're on the same page on that, I want to start to drill into then some of the things that we are specifically focusing on, which is EDI, e-commerce, and PIM. But before we do that, I want to talk about one other thing that's kind of come as a buzzword, is this concept called omni-channel. And the definition is, denoting or relating a type of retail integrates different methods of shopping available, for a consumer, basically through online. That's a definition, and that came from lexico.com. But here's how I would present it. You've got a customer, and in the past, back in the day, in the 1950s, you'd have a sales rep, or they'd come in and they'd go to the will call counter, or they'd go to the counter and actually purchase things at the store or the branch, depending on if you define it as a store or a branch. And then what kind of came about was this idea of, instead of them coming through that aspect, we maybe used EDI or a website for them to actually have that as that touch point, that channel for them to be able to interface with you as a supplier to them. And then as things built on, we got mobile apps, we got social media that started to happen. And ultimately what happened is we got into this concept of a marketplace. And I want to talk a little bit about that a little later. But today, what I want to talk about from a marketplace is what you think of as maybe eBay, Amazon. Some of those are the basic ones. Wayfair, if you get to the retail, some aspects of some of these things. Those marketplaces have become the big buzzword now, and we're going to drill into that here when we get into the technological drill down. So I'm going to kind of stop right now. Cheryl, do we have any questions at this point?
No, we don't have any questions yet.
Cool, then I'll keep going. All right, so let's do a technologically drill down. If we're all on the same page of what is digital commerce, and from my perspective, digital commerce is the idea of adding technology to anything that's involved in the commerce relationship with your customers and your vendors. Let's drill down into some of that. I want to drill down into specifically 3 areas. But before I get into that, I want to talk about, let's look at the pre-1970s. And some of you, if you're old enough, you will remember this. And this is, like I said, I was raised in an auto parts distributor, and this is the way it was. And basically, you had vendors, you had customers, and you had you. And everything was done manually. Everything was done on a piece of paper. You'd get invoices through snail mail, through the postal service. You'd have to order things by picking up the phone maybe and talking to the vendor. Customers, you'd actually have sales rep go out. I remember my dad having a sales rep going out to all the service stations and talking to them and seeing what they needed. And to a certain extent, this concept of VMI, which is vendor managed inventory, that's really not changed. That's nothing new. That's been around for a long time, in the sense that my dad had a sales rep that would go out. He would not even have to talk to anybody. He'd just go look at their shelves, see what they needed, place the order for them, and then the next day he'd be delivering all those items and stock the shelves for them. Basically, that was vendor managed inventory, just happened to be done non-electronically. So we really haven't done a whole bunch other than adding technology to those kinds of things. And the first thing that was the technology, which is what you are familiar with, is this P21 ERP. And the vendors had their ERP, whether it be SAP, or if they had Microsoft Dynamics, or if they had Oracle, or name an ERP from a vendor perspective. And the customers may or may not have had an ERP. But back in those days, it wasn't just an ERP, it was really an accounting and inventory management system. And the first technology that kind of came out to try to start making this happen was the internet. And of course, if you're Al Gore, he thinks he designed the internet, but there's also at the same time this thing called a value-added network. And all a value-added network was guys like GEIS, G-E-I-S, who were basically saying, I'm going to start passing documents back and forth, and it was a value-added network that says, I'm going to do this for you and make sure it was secure and that there wasn't any problems. It was pre-internet aspects. And we had EDI come out. So EDI, electronic data interchange, the idea of EDI is to have a system-to-system integration, which basically what that means is instead of a user going any place, they'd go into their own ERP system, and that ERP system would actually pass the transactions back and forth. Now, some of you already probably know what EDI is. Some of you may have not. You may think of EDI back in the day when you had vans, was this thing called ANSI X12. That's the American National Standards Institute. X12 is the standard that you would have documents, specifically an 810, which is an invoice, an 850, which is a purchase order, an 855, which is a purchase order acknowledgement, an 856, which is an advanced ship notice. They put numbers to them, and this became a whole bunch of buzzwords for for most people that EDI became very, very scary. I don't want to have to deal with it. I don't have to want to deal with a specific type of segment or envelope. I don't want to have to learn how these all work. What's the N segment? What's the BG segment? And learn all those kinds of things. So I avoid EDI. What we've seen over time, and we've been doing EDI for over 20 years now, is that EDI isn't just ANSI X12. It includes things like, and we have this today already, a customer sends in a spreadsheet with their customer part numbers on the spreadsheet. They email it to a general email address. We walk through that spreadsheet. We convert those part numbers to the P21 part numbers. We then walk through, we know who the customer is. We know their default warehouse. We're able to go get pricing for it. And we're able to go get the specific customer pricing for them through a set of APIs. And we'll talk a little bit more about APIs. But we walk through those APIs and we get a bunch of pricing, update the spreadsheet with their prices for their part numbers, and then email it back to them without any, and I'm very specific, zero human intervention on this, so that it gets sent back to the customer within 4 minutes. And so there's pricing that's being available, and that's technically electronic data interchange, because our definition of EDI is this concept of system-to-system integration. And if we look at, again, Gartner, they have a peer guide of what they call now integration brokerage software. And you can read this, but they have EDI and B2B commerce integration services, and it's focused based on application to application integration. So in other words, it's not human to application integration, it's application to application integration. And this is where EDI is probably one of the cornerstones to digital commerce, because now what we're doing is we're passing the information back and forth between trading partners with a system-to-system interface. It's not e-commerce. And so the thing I really want you to walk away from today is that digital commerce is not just e-commerce. And I'm talking about EDI as being part of that. The next piece I want to talk about that's become the buzzword of this is, now let's look at a marketplace. And let's talk specifically about Amazon for argument's sake. That the customer now goes to Amazon and they go interface with Amazon for purchasing. But product information would probably be coming from you. And we're actually doing this today with a P21 customer, where what happens is they're taking their P21 data, they're earmarking which ones they want, and it takes that product information and puts it into, through the Amazon APIs, and actually eBay as well. Through those APIs, we are publishing their product information to Amazon. And then when the customer goes into the marketplace, Amazon is then sending them a purchase order, and it's actually a sales order in your system. It's called an 850N, which stands for purchase order. They're sending them actually a purchase order in that becomes a sales order in your system for the customer, and then you do the fulfillment your way. You could theoretically send them other things like sending them an advanced ship notice to Amazon. Those kinds of pieces are possible. We don't have that customer doing it today. And you also get into the fulfillment piece that I was talking about. That's called fulfilled by Amazon. There's fulfilled by merchant and there's fulfilled by Amazon. The fulfilled by Amazon, be careful of it, because what you're really now doing is you're letting that Amazon is actually having that relationship with your customer, as opposed to you having a relationship with your customer. So one of the things you might want to think about is this concept, and Epicor talks about it, is the top 50 B2B marketplaces. And if you notice, these are the ones you think. They're not the ones like Amazon or some of the other places that you'd be familiar with. Instead, they're the third-party ones. So they're starting to see some new marketplaces coming out. And if you look on the list here a little bit, for me, it was interesting. It's an auto and equipment parts. There's parttraders.us.com, and they're a $34 million capital formed company that they're trying to compete with the Grangers of the world and all those other companies out there that are doing their own marketplaces. So that's kind of the concept of EDI. I want to do a quick demo of what we've done with Partner Connect. Partner Connect is our actual solution for EDI. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We've been talking about this concept of what EDI is, and we happen to have a solution for it, but that doesn't mean it's the only solution that's out there. I would love to talk to you at Connect about this, or talk to you offline if you're not going to make it to Connect. But basically, the concept of what we believe EDI should be is it should be exception based. So in other words, you don't focus on the transactions. There's really not much to demo on the transactions. What the demo is going to be is what happens with the exceptions and how do you deal with it as an end user. First of all, you'd be going to My Account, you'd be logging in, and then when you log in, you'll get a screen that looks like this. And under that, we've got a Partner Connect admin, and there are some pieces that we've added, and I'm going to just jump through a couple of them. One is a cross-reference maintenance. I was timed out. Sorry about that. Let me log back in because it kicked me out of my timeout. And what that means is things like cross-references for ship tos, or there's a whole bunch of pieces and parts that may need cross-references that aren't in P21, and that we need to keep and manage those kinds of things from a perspective of cross-references for not just products, but it could be lots of things that you're cross-referencing. So when that comes up, so one of the things, for example, is we've got cross-reference of add-on codes, or we've got cross-references of inside sales reps or notifications or ship tos. There's lots of different ways that you can have cross-references, and that we've created it so that you can maintain this yourself. Another thing we've got is we've got this thing called a document count. So we're showing you how many of your documents have actually been going in and out. We are talking about document skips. So in a document skip, we have the ability to say, okay, which documents do you want to skip? And you can say, I want to skip these documents and have it so that they're not transacted, so that you're managing what's coming in. Again, we're trying to work in a headless world. Maybe you want to resubmit. Somehow or other, somebody didn't receive a specific document for you. We can look at in this, if we go and search for purchase order acknowledgement, for example, on this, it will then bring back all of those that we've seen. We can look at those documents out there, and you can even get to a point of a document tracker. It tells you where do we stand in this process. A PO was sent, an ASN received. It tells you all the different phases of that document. Bottom line of what I'm trying to show you here is we're trying to give you an interface to manage things for the exceptions. Most of the time when you get into EDI, it's kind of just let it go, let it run, and not have problems. But in reality, you have problems. What are the problems typically? Non-stocks. Customer sends you something that you haven't got as an item that's been set up in P21 for a sales order that's come in. Those kinds of things happen all the time. Today, the way you're handling it is you've got a sales rep that handles it. Instead, we want EDI to be able to handle it. Okay, so that's EDI. Let's go ahead and go to the next technology. Let's talk about e-commerce. Everybody knows about e-commerce. We've heard this buzzword quite a bit, where basically the customer comes in, they go to your e-storefront, and ideally that interfaces with P21. In a lot of cases, it doesn't always interface with P21. And I wrote a white paper recently because I got dinged by this back in March of 2020 when the COVID hit us for the first time. Best Buy had said that they had a cell phone. We lost a cell phone on an airplane, and they said they had it. So we drove for 20 minutes to the store that said they had it, placed the order. We get there, and they said, oh, no, we actually didn't have it in stock because the system wasn't updated. We actually sold out of all those. So near real time is not real time. So if you've got an e-commerce solution today that is near real time, which means you're batching your availability, you're batching your prices into the ERP or into the e-storefront from P21, that's not real time. They should be a headless. You may have heard the term called headless e-commerce right now. What that basically is saying is your e-commerce solution should not be dependent upon what's happening in the back office, that you can switch that out based on different pieces. Sometimes it needs to be in your e-storefront database. Sometimes it needs to be in your ERP database. Some of the things we are doing is we're making sure through our APIs that pricing and availability is all real time as opposed to near real time. Same with ordering. So if someone places an order, it actually commits stock right away. The other thing you may have heard about this thing called marketplaces getting involved, or they're using the term now called punch out. And I've heard punch out being used in multiple different ways. But punch out has this concept that the marketplace, things like Coupa, are saying that you can actually go and buy things through their browser, which punches out into your e-storefront. And that's something that's starting to grow a little bit as well. We're of the philosophy that that shouldn't necessarily be the way it should be done, but it is being done by some people, and they're buying into this concept of Coupa. Our concept of the marketplace should be like what with Amazon, where you basically have it done through an EDI solution. But both ways are very possible solutions. But if we look at go back to that definition from Gartner, and they call digital commerce, what they're really talking about is e-commerce in their definition. They're not taking it to all of the pieces and parts, so that when you look at their magic quadrant, which some of you may be familiar with, this magic quadrant, if you look on here, everything in here has nothing to do with what they were talking about in their other one, which was the IB solution, or their application solution. They call this digital commerce, but I make an argument that digital commerce includes both of them, or quite honestly includes even more than what we're talking about. It includes things like warehouse management solution and proof of delivery, and all those other technological pieces are part of the digital commerce aspects. And oh, by the way, when you look on this, you'll see Magento is in the upper right-hand corner. Well, I want to give you a quick little demo of what we've done with our e-commerce solution, which is integrated with P21, and that is called Altitude. And what we've done is we have taken and said, we want to have a solution for e-commerce, and we're going to base it off of Magento, which you may be familiar with in the Epicor world. It's called ECC. They've based it on Magento as well. There are two flavors of Magento. One flavor is their open source edition, and the other one is their commerce edition. We are basing it on their open source edition, which is free, and then we have wrapped around it our APIs to make those integration pieces work. Now, hopefully this hasn't kicked me out as well, but let's go look. This is actually a P21 customer, Selecta, and I have gone into theirs. I'm not going to get into too much of what we've got because some of this is still being in development, but I'm going to go ahead and sign in and show you those things. I'm not going to show you all the obvious things that you're familiar with. The obvious things you're familiar with is let's go search for a product, let's go find a product, let's go find specific products by attributes and by categories. What I want to show you is some of the things that we were talking about before in the digital commerce, is this idea of what's happening with the account and forming a better relationship with the customer all through APIs. These are all real-time pieces that are out there. One of them happens to be an address book. An address book in Magento happens to be a ship to back in P21. So we've integrated those two. If I go look at balances, and oh, by the way, if they just bought something 10 minutes ago and it went to their last statement balance, it would be updating this statement balance real time for it. This isn't near real time, this is real time. Or if I go look at orders, these are the open orders that have been created for this customer, both through the e-commerce solution and or through the ERP, which could have been from EDI. That's why I make the distinction that digital commerce is more than just e-commerce. And if I look at the orders, and you can see if I look at the dates here, you'll see on 7/27/21, there was an order that was placed on this, and I can look at that order myself, since I've got a long, think of this as a portal, that's where I was talking about that interface, the UI back into it. I can see the items that were placed in this order, whether it was through the portal or was it done directly through P21 or was it done through EDI. And if I like this, I can click on reorder and place the order again. Where I'm going with this is that the fact that to bring all these pieces together, it doesn't have to be just little silos of information, that this information I'm looking at may have come from an EDI document, and maybe I want to pay some invoices. So I could go to invoices and say, I want to pay specific invoices if we've turned it on. I can't remember if we've turned it on with these guys or not, but I can go check, pay these invoices, and the payment processing is done from this perspective, even if the orders have actually come through from a perspective of, say, EDI or an inside sales rep, an outside sales rep, whatever's the way that it got into P21, it's all coming through so that you've got this headless way for a user to come look at it. All right, let's keep going. So let's get back and let's talk about the third piece. Let's talk about PIM, or Product Information Management. This is a new sort of technology that the key to your P21 and your eStorefront databases is making sure that they don't lose the data. In other words, it stays current. It doesn't become perishable. To do that, we've started to see that we're going to have this PIM to be interfacing with those two pieces of technology. And what that means is, as we're going through this and working with those items, it updates those items real time. Gartner, they say, here's the pieces that are important for a PIM. And these are where some of the buzzwords that you've heard. One is a product master data. That's the SKU, the weight, the dimensions, color, size, all those pieces. It also, what they didn't put on here, are this concept of called categories and attributes. That's the e-commerce side. Or product rich content. In other words, what's the marketing description? Maybe it's also upsell, cross-sell, supersedes, replacements, all those kinds of things. And then this thing called DAM, digital asset management. So if you hear of DAM, all they're really talking about are the pictures and the videos and the diagrams and the spec sheets and all those kinds of things are part of that. So that's what makes up the PIM. Maybe it'll make a little bit more sense if I go into a demo. So let me go ahead and pop over. And we have a product called Keystone for a PIM. Now I've already gone ahead and logged in. And if I go over here and I look at, this is just another generic Magento website. And I go look at the 9 volts and I see this one here and it's test 245-B and the price is $49.52. Now, what I can do is I can go look at my data objects. Again, I have assets. I can go look at the data sheets. I can go see by category. And if you notice, these are the same things that Selecta has. Here's a data sheet for a 9-volt battery. Here's a data sheet for AA batteries. Here's data sheets. These are all the spec sheets that we're managing. We may have images related to it for my website, and I manage those. Here's an image for a 9 volts, as well as I have my attributes that I can control in my website. And you'll notice here the attributes are size and voltage, or maybe I have categories. What are they going to be? 9 volt, or in this case, poor cell, and then 9 volt AA, AAA. And if I look over here, I've got poor cell, AA, AAA, C. Those are the categories. And then I've got my products. And under my products, I happen to have these ones, say, for example, 1-001. Here's the 1-001, which is 245B. I go look at that item. And I want to change the name. I'm going to change it from -B to -C. And in the general, I'm going to change that from 52 cents, $49.52. I'm going to change it to $40.66. I'm going to save it. I'm managing this product here. Now, the kicker to it is I want to, and I'm going to jump over and show you something else as well. Over in P21, I've got it as -B. And if I go look at default prices, you'll see the $49.52. Let's go back over to the PIM. What we've done is we say, okay, let's first push it to altitude. So we're going to push all these items, and we're going to push the categories. We're going to push the attributes. We're going to push all these things to Magento, and that's going to keep working here. And it's chugging away, and it's pushing all this, and it's only updating those products that have been modified recently. So it's still working back here. And what'll happen is it'll update the website. Okay, so all the products have been pushed to Magento. If I go over to the website, now there may be some caching that may come into play, so it may take a minute here that it may have to do a refresh. There we go. See, $40.66. Now I have still not done anything to the Prophet 21 side. It still has those prices. Let's pop back over. Let's go into here and push it to P21. Now I push it, it'll come back, say it's completed, and it's pushing again all the ones that have been modified. Now if I go back over to P21, I'm going to jump from one product to another, so it does a refresh here. Jump from that one to this one. Now go back over. And you'll see that it has the -C, and if I look at my default prices, there it's $40.66. So in essence, what am I really doing here? I'm basically creating a standard location to manage my product information, and then I push it out to the different user interfaces that are out there. That's the idea of a PIM. So I have bounced through a lot of stuff really fast. And keep in mind, I've only talked about 3 of all these other technologies for digital commerce. But digital commerce is more than just e-commerce. That's the thing I really want you to walk away from this with, is don't think of it as just being a web storefront. And that EDI is system to system, and it's not just ANSI X12. And that e-commerce is for the user to system interface. And that PIM is really the cornerstone. That's why we named it Keystone, because it's the cornerstone to your content, to all the product information, to the images, to the data sheets, all those things then push to the appropriate places that they're going to be used, whether it be P21 or be your e-commerce solution or wherever else you want to push this to. Theoretically, you could push it from Keystone to Amazon for that product information. And the cornerstone to the integration for P21 are the APIs. All right, I've talked really fast. I do want to talk real quick about Connect. We are going to be there. Really proud to be a sponsor this year. We're more of a sponsor this year than we have been in the past. And we're going to be at booth 13. So if you're going to be there and you disagree with anything I've said or you have questions about what I'm saying, please, I'd love to have you come by. Even if we're going to be masked, you'll see me smiling with my mask on because you'll see it in my eyes. That's what they all say. So we'll be glad to see you guys in Atlanta on August 15th. And hopefully we'll see you real soon, if not then, at the following year. Cheryl, are there any questions at this point?
We don't have any questions, but I think like everyone else, we're still trying to catch up. You covered a lot. But this is what talking to you is like. It's like opening up this can and it just doesn't stop. There's so much. And so if you're going to Connect, which, oh my God, is in 10 days, obviously we have Grey Wolf has a booth there, so you can stop by and make an appointment for coffee and go sit and chat. Unfortunately, you're right, we are wearing masks this year, so you can't see that beautiful smile that I've come to know and love. But definitely check it out. Or just if you're not coming to Connect or if you're choosing to attend virtually from home, I mean, the door is always open to set aside a one-on-one to have a deeper conversation. I think the challenge today was you covered so much information in like 55 minutes, not even, that it almost like a deep dive one-on-one is probably the best next step. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And that's what my objective today was, is just to address the paradigm of what is digital commerce and what you can and can't. There's no can't anymore. With enough time and enough money, you can almost do anything you want to do with technology for your institute, your establishment.
But we don't have any questions. Are there any other thoughts you wanted to share or cover again before we wrap up?
No, like I said, there's only one other thing, that APIs, I don't want that to scare people. Think of APIs as just purely the window to P21. And even though Epicor has their own APIs, so do we. We are very affordable. Just to give you guys a feel for pricing on some of this stuff, our APIs are $500 a year. Our Partner Connect starts out at $60 a month. Our Altitude actually does start out free. You can get Magento up and running for free in our environment. And if you get to the integration with P21 and all the things that you want to do that I'm recommending in this webinar, you're talking $180 a month. And our PIM for Keystone, again, free. It's based on PIM Core. If you want to just do a starting out, you can get into PIM Core without any integration, but integration with P21 and Altitude, it's $180 a month is what our subscription rate is. So it's not like we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars like you may see with other solutions.
Well, with that, we'll give everyone a few minutes back to their day. A reminder, of course, this session was recorded and will be posted on the user group forum in about 24 hours. So you will find it in the online learning area. So watch for that. And this was our last webinar before the conference. So you won't hear from me now until next weekend. So for those of you traveling to Atlanta, I look forward to seeing you, and safe travels as we all go down there. And for everyone else, please keep commenting and interacting on the user group forum. keep the conversation going and stay tuned for all the virtual sessions that will be held for Connect when we all get back. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Oh, thanks, Cheryl.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.